Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Greetings and welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and with me, as always, Chris Boroff.
This is the part where we're going to insert the sound effects of the rattling chains. And
Yeah, right.
You might want to take the names again because I'm not Chris Boroff.
Yeah, no, you're not. That is Chris Boroff. Why don't you go ahead and give us an audio cue of who the hell you are?
I saw what happened with Irina and her cat people.
And the interrupting sound effects were Zach Powers.
Most misleading title ever.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us in the Movie Trap. Here on the Movie Trap, what normally happens is one of us picks a theme, and then each one of us picks a movie based on that theme. We all have an allocated total of points for 10, because once we've watched all the movies, we are going to vote on using those points to find out which one was our favorite, and whichever movie wins the theme gets to pick the next theme. However, this is a little different because we are in our now annual Halloween Spooky Edition. So what has happened is that we rolled a random dice to choose the theme for us, and then rolled for random order, and we are in the midst of classic horror movies, meaning any horror movie before 1959. And the dice has chosen Chris Boroff to choose the film.
59 inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, up to and including 1959. In case we want any of those old great 3D movies. So Chris Boroff has chosen an odd movie that I would not have called him to pick, considering that there are the legions of choices out there,
Sure.
including the one that is the predecessor of this one.
Sure.
Boroff has chosen 1944's Curse of the Cat People.
Right. And he said he was choosing between safe and unique, I think, were his choices, and this was his unique choice.
Oh, well.
It was also valuable to say that I did the chalk pick last year, so I decided to go a little wild this year, and it got back to me. Yeah, it caught me this time.
Hard to get a chalk pick in this film. I guess it just depends on what everybody else picks, because it's just such a
we'll get into it. I don't think this is a bad movie. It's just
no.
We'll talk about it.
Anyway,
We're literally 1 year short of one of my favorite old horror films, so it was a little bit killing me when I picked this one.
You could have picked that film last year, as a matter of fact.
That's true. You had your chance, Buster.
Oh well, I understand. Eyes without a face will wait for someday.
Let's end the suspense. And Zach Powers, why don't you reveal to us the Curse of the Cat People?
Okay.
Stay tuned, folks. There is no curse. There is no cat people.
There's barely a cat.
Yeah.
There are people, so I'll give it that.
That's true.
This movie features people.
Some of those kids are very catty.
Anyway, The Curse of the Cat People is a 1944 fantasy thriller psychological. I mean, horror
kids movie.
We'll talk about if the term horror applies here as we go forward.
Sure.
It is directed by Gunther von Fritsch and Robert Wise. It is Robert Wise's directorial debut. It stars Simone Simon, Kent Smith, and Jane Randolph. In fact, the same cast, plus a young girl named Ann Carter, from the 1942 movie Cat People, of which it is ostensibly a sequel, but not really. So, this film focuses on a young 6-year-old girl named Amy, who resides in Tarrytown, New York, famous for being the place where Washington Irving lived, the writer of Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow, in fact, plays into this movie a bit. So
Tarrytown, by the way, I've always wanted to point out. When I lived in New York, I always it's pronounced Tarrytown, not because I said I'm, moron from Colorado. It's just like Tarrytown. No, it's pronounced Tarrytown.
Yeah. I mean, I believe Terry with an A is indeed a word.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm just an idiot.
Or maybe that's spelled with an E. I don't know. Anyway, regardless, It begins with a 6-year-old and her classmates, Amy and her classmates, playing in the glen that is ostensibly the location of the Sleepy Hollow legend. There is a quick insert shot of some boys finding a cat and pretending to shoot a machine gun at it.
Yeah.
This will be the exclusive, the only cat in the film. The cat does not return. That's the end of the cat stuff.
Yeah.
Forget about
And
the
even
cats.
the kid's imitation of a gun cracked me up. It took me right out of the movie because he just.
I love the fact that it was in there as though it was an afterthought. We're like, oh man, people are going to wonder where the cats are. Stick one in the first 5 minutes. Just have a kid shoot a fake gun at it, and we're good. And
They got their money's worth.
Yeah.
Anyway, we find that one of the classmates, Amy, has a tendency to daydream. She gets stuck in her fantasy worlds, and when they play their old-timey ass games about passing shoes around or whatever the fuck, Amy is not paying attention, as per usual. Instead, she wanders off to chase a friendly butterfly. When a boy, not a cat, when a classmate of hers catches the butterfly for her and accidentally crushes it, she slaps him in the face, causing some concern from her parents and teacher, who worry that she is too stuck in her own fantasy world, too imaginative. Her father, in particular, is concerned because his previous wife, Irina, had an active imagination and it led to her death, or at least that's how he recounts the events of the first movie. I don't know how accurate that is. Anyway,
we'll have Carlson kick in on that a little bit later to tell us how this one ties into the original.
It's there.
Amy has a birthday party and no other children come because she mailed the letters in the tree in the backyard that her father had once told her was a magic mailbox many years prior, so no kids got the letter. So she wishes on her birthday cake to be a better daughter, and then attempts to play with more kids, be more sociable, but the kids spurn her because they didn't get invited to her birthday party. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ultimately, she tries to chase them, so they could play, and ends up in front of a house that belongs to, quote, a witch. And an old woman from an upper floor throws her a gift of a wishing ring. And Amy discovers from the family butler, I think, that it's a wishing ring. And that if she turns it just so and makes a wish, the wish will come true. She does so and wishes for a friend, and begins to play with an unseen force in the yard, singing and running around and all these things. The shit children do. There's also a scene where she has a hoop and a stick, so they have all those old-timey ass games. Anyway. So the next day, she's instructed to return the ring because it's too nice. She's initially supposed to go with the butler, but he's busy and she ends up going alone. And it turns out the house is inhabited by not a witch, but an eccentric former stage actress named Julia, who is very lonely and perhaps a little bit not all there in the head. And her daughter, but Julia does not believe her to be her daughter. Her daughter's named Barbara. Barbara is constantly like, I am your daughter. I am Barbara. And Julia is always like, no, my Barbara died when she was 6. You're an evil imposter. So she's,
she's you'll notice a trend in this of like slight psychological underpinning to stuff. And in this case, she is showing signs of Capgras syndrome. And she's most likely based off Madame Macabre, who was the initial patient who had Capgras syndrome, where it is the syndrome where you assume that loved ones have been replaced by exact doppelgangers, and you no longer accept them as who they are and who they say they are. And there's been a history of this. It's essentially like a brain lesion or a dementia that affects people. In this case, they're just explaining it as she's kind of an unpleasant old lady who won't accept her daughter.
Okay. I don't know if I know Robert Wise later directed a movie called The Body Snatcher, but I don't know if that's related to The Body Snatchers or if it's just people who take bodies.
Don't think so.
If it's the one with Boris Karloff, I think they're just stealing bodies.
It is indeed. Okay, so it's more like a Burke and Hare kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so I guess that's unrelated. Back to the story.
Meanwhile, in another movie.
That one sounds way more fun, though, now that you reminded me
no
of it.
kidding. Hell, your psychological explanation of the Farron lady was more interesting. Anyway, keep going, Zach.
Regardless, the old woman, who is a stage actor, does a performance for Amy where she sort of recites the legend of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. And, for Amy, Edward comes to pick her up, and, as they leave, Julia seems sort of resentful towards Amy because her mother is showing some affection towards her. That night, Amy is scared by the legend of Sleepy Hollow and unable to sleep. She calls upon her magical friend and, to sing her a song, and Amy eventually falls asleep with the help of her imaginary friend. So later, Amy finds a photograph of her father's first wife, Irina, and suddenly, the next time we see the friend, it takes the form of Irina. And the two begin playing together in the garden on a regular basis. Later that year, at Christmas Eve, Amy buys gifts for everyone in her family, including one for Irina, which, when a bunch of carolers come over and the family's just like, hey, come in for a while. I don't know if this is a thing, but whatever.
I think that's an old-timey thing. It's not something people really did that much, but it was the old, like, a lot of this is like playing homage to like old traditions that people didn't actually do. It was like stuff that people do in movies. So yeah, they used to have that thing where they would invite the carolers in to have something to eat and drink. I don't imagine.
Or they do it on every Christmas special, like back in the 70s or whatever. Why? It's Willie Nelson. Come on in.
Anyway, they invite the carolers in, and they start to sing another song inside the house, some old ass song, and
some of that old ass Christmas shit.
Yeah, it's like. While erstwhile he did lay a slumber in or some shit like that. It's some bullshit like that. Anyway, Amy slips outside and gives Irina, her imaginary friend, her gift, which is a nice brooch. And the next day she goes to the old woman Julia's house and gives her a gift, a ring, which she promptly removes a ring that the King of Spain gave her and puts this new ring on because it's such a nice gift. Barbara is kind of enraged by this because her own gifts were rejected by her mother, and says and it's clear she's getting more and more angry at this little girl. Later, Amy finds another photo of Irina and her dad and insists that my imaginary friend too. And he's like, okay, point out this imaginary friend. And she refuses to say that she's not there. So the dad takes her upstairs and gives her her first ever spanking because she's doing too much imagining. And that's when the teacher, who's around for some reason, is like, kids have imaginary friends sometimes and it's not like that bad. Like they'll grow out of it if they can have a real friend, I guess. And she convinces Oliver maybe he's going about this the wrong way, but Amy is, worried that her friend will leave because now Irina's like, I'm ruining your relationship with your father. I have to go. And Amy runs out of the house trying to find her imaginary friend into a blizzard. She crosses the Sleepy Hollow Bridge where she briefly thinks the Headless Horseman is coming, but it's just a truck, before, coming to Julia's house. Meanwhile, her parents have started a search party to try and find her. It's freezing outside. Julia takes her in and is like, oh, we can't let my daughter see you. She'll, who knows what she'll do if she finds you. I'll hide you upstairs. She doesn't know the upstairs as well for some reason. And on the way upstairs, Julia fucking dies because she can't handle the stairs.
Not that she falls. She just collapses.
She's just a moth caught in a hurricane of needing to get up those stairs.
Yeah. But the stairs were too much. They needed one of those things like in Gremlins that kills the old woman. Um,
I think they
And
just
then-
needed to take the stairs slightly slower. Just slightly slower. Maybe give Grandma a good 5 minutes to get up the stairs rather than just hustling up like there's a fire.
How about putting Grandma's bedroom on the ground level? How about that?
I think the bedroom was on the ground level. The hiding place was on the second.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
That's when Barbara comes home and sees her mother dead next to this little girl. And she's like, "You've even taken my mother's final moments from me." And she's like, "All right, I'm going to murder this little kid." And as she approaches the kid to murder her, Amy starts having hallucinations or imagining again and is like, "My friend," and sees Barbara as Irina and repeatedly inquiring her to be her friend. Barbara relents and decides not to murder her. Just in time for everybody to arrive and take the daughter to safety. Back home, Oliver agrees to accept that the imaginary friend is indeed in the backyard and go with his daughter's imaginary games and be closer to her, be a better friend to her. And that is the end of the movie. Irina disappears as they enter the house, implying that perhaps the daughter has outgrown her need for Irina.
Because what she really needed was acceptance from her dad. Yeah.
And it was also the problem with the first cat people. Anyway, yeah.
Well, how about that? How does it connect?
Oh
Well, first of all, again, readers, listeners, I want you to go over that and remember, no curses. Ain't no cat people. Cat, technically. Technically a cat.
And kind of a ghost story.
Yeah,
maybe
the
a ghost story.
The trailer on this one I'm very tempted to do as the tag on this, because the trailer is so manipulative. They suggest so much shit is going to happen involving cats and horror and fear, and it is just like they take shots from this movie where the lighting was dramatic and they add these extreme tags and lurid fantasy of danger and things like that pop up on the screen. You're like, what?
I actually was going to send, I didn't want to send this because I didn't know if you guys had seen it yet, and I didn't want to reveal too much about the story, but when I looked up Curse of the Cat People on the gift bar, there is a still from the trailer that's to torment a child, and it's the girl turning in her bed.
Yeah, I mean, just because, let's be honest, this movie really had nothing to do with, because it's ostensibly a sequel from a movie from 1942 called Cat People, and it is literally Irina, that's her name. She's alive at this point, and Ollie is there, the dad, and Alice, who Oliver and Alice are co-workers at this point, and it also stars Elizabeth Russell, uncredited, as the actual cat person. Elizabeth Russell played the Barbara Farron, the daughter, who almost killed the little girl. Barely in the first Cat People, but she's got a very important part, because essentially, I won't get into too much detail of the plot, but how it ties in is Irina is a Serbian immigrant who is living in Tarrytown or New York or whatever, and she meets up with Oliver. They fall in love, but Irina really believes in this old curse from this village she grew up in, and that this Serbian king rescued her village from this dangerous satanic cult that worshiped cats or whatever, and this king kind of killed everybody or whatever, and she really likes the story, but she's kind of fascinated and scared of cats in this weird thing, especially at the zoo. She's got this fixation with this particular panther. Her husband, Oliver, doesn't like this. He doesn't think much of imagining, if I'm going to take the two movies in context. He's not much for, abstract thinking. He sends her to a psychologist because he thinks she's taking these myths a little too seriously, and she begins to suspect that Oliver and Alice are having an affair at work, and so she kind of releases the panther / becomes a panther and starts stalking and killing people, and she attacks her psychiatrist. They ended up killing her or whatever. And then she turns back and we're like, oh, what happened? It must have been a curse or whatever. That was actually the Curse of the Cat People. They could have called the first movie, Curse of the Cat People, would have made more sense. But what happened is that Cat People was actually a successful movie for RKO. It made a lot of money. So when this basically same writing team and producing team came up with this story, which originally was titled Amy and Her Imaginary Friend, which I think would have been far more appropriate.
Yeah. It's just, based on my notes here, it was just Amy and her friend.
Amy and her friend. And that would have been, anyway, that would have been a great title. But they're the ones.
That would have accurately.
RKO is the one who insisted on calling it The Curse of the Cat People. So I'm wondering how much retrofitting was made.
Well, I could
into this original.
answer a small amount, but first, title Amy and her friend. Things that are in this movie, Amy's in this movie. Her friend, she's in this movie.
Yep. An
A+, they did it.
Yeah.
You knocked it out of the park. I think that title's a little dull, but it's at least accurate.
Sure.
Anyway, and it definitely, like, Curse of the Cat People, like, obviously ramps up the horror aspect. Amy and her friend, because I don't know that this is a horror movie.
Well, that's why when Borf brought up the trailer, that like how misleading it is, the title is misleading. It was meant to be misleading. They're like, we'll just call it Curse of the Cat People. We'll show a cat the first 5 minutes. They'll be fine.
This episode is our September Halloween episode, so I guess it's like we're building up to.
Yeah, I guess
so. The weird thing with this one, I actually know a little bit of the history on this because I vaguely remember watching this in 2006. I had such a vague memory of it, and I didn't remember much of the movie plot itself, so I thought it was scarier. But I do remember hearing about the production history on this because they had a commentary track. And I guess Val Lewton is the main producer on this. He was producer on Cat People, but all the stuff he was involved in, he was way more hands-on. He wasn't a producer in the sense of like, it's more like how TV producers are. Like, he was really hands-on. He was really integral in how the scripts were written. He was really integral in how the directing was done. But this one had a funny thing on it because he'd hired a director. He'd hired the Gunter Fritsch, and that guy bounced, or he got fired because I guess Val Lewton didn't like what he was doing. And he went to Robert Wise, who I think at the time had been hired on as an editor, and he said, you either direct this or I'm going to get someone else to direct this. And Robert Wise, being true to everything I've heard about him, was very bashful about having to take on the directing thing. He was like, I don't want to screw over my friend. And Val Lewton just sort of laid it out as like, well, you're either going to direct this or someone else will. So your friend is out of this job either way. It's either going to help you or you're going to, it's not going to do anything for you. So that's why he jumped on it. But it was really strange that they decided to tie these two together because it sounds to me just like what you guys are describing, where it was probably just the studio needed a hit. They realized no one's going to go see Amy and her friend because no one knows who Amy or her friend are. So they just decided to gussy it up.
Right. Change it to gussy it up and just go, okay, well, we made a bunch of money on Cat People, so let's just throw that in there and that'll at least make our money back, because a part of the reason why Lewton was able to get away with what he was with RKO is because he was, for the most part, under budget and on schedule. That's what happened with Curse of the Cat People, is that the guy was running way behind and running way over budget, and Lewton isn't going to tolerate that. And honestly, I think had RKO given this movie a little bit more money and spent a little bit more time on the B story with the Farrens, this probably could have been a better movie. And if we leaned into the heavy of the sort of childhood trauma of fantasy / disillusionment, that would have been a much more interesting movie, and we would have ditched the whole, like, bamboozlement of Curse of the Cat People. But what I do appreciate is that both movies, both the similar theme that I think he does kind of thread into both films is that the whole, like, ghostly aspects of both movies are driven by an emotional kind of drive. Like, Arena's and Cat People's driven by like this kind of jealousy and insecurity, and Amy's is driven by loneliness and bashfulness and misunderstanding and kind of having more fun in a fantasy. That there's an emotional drive to that, and I do appreciate that. But that also is true in Cat People as well.
It's worth noting, just on the subject of the renaming, because this is a thing I found in terms of how the studio handled making this movie and making it a sequel to Cat People. So per like the Turner Classic Movie Archive page on this, when they saw the cut of this movie, RKO was pretty disappointed because it was not a horror movie. So they were like, okay, we're going to do some retakes. They added scenes at that point. So the scene of the two boys and the cat is added. Like, originally the movie just truly didn't have any fucking cats in it. And so they added this pointless scene of two kids chasing a black cat that lasts 3 seconds, and a couple other maybe nominally horror scenes. It doesn't say exactly what. And in return, cut a couple scenes. Like, there's a scene where Amy reads Sleeping Beauty, and that inspires her, like, princess stuff that she plays with Irina. Doesn't seem too important. But definitely, yeah, they re-edited it, and, like, they were going to market this fully as a horror movie. Like, they were considering, like, having cat prints going to the theater, or, like, you know, one of these is send out a small group of men and women wearing cat masks to walk through the streets with cards on their back reading, "Are cats people?" I don't know what kind of marketing plan that was. They didn't do it. But
wow, that would have been amazing.
That would have been scarier than the movie.
Yeah, and had nothing to do with it. But just
yeah.
Just one thing, since we're talking about marketing on this movie, I actually got the the Blu-ray, and I noticed on the back it says Sir Lancelot as an actor.
I'm assuming that's the cat.
Is that the cat?
I'm assuming that has to be the cat because I can't find any IMDb information on Sir Lancelot.
This is one and only breakthrough, and it's a reshoot by a studio. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's something comforting to me.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm on the Wikipedia page for this film. Sir Lancelot as Edward, the servant. His name is Lancelot Victor Edward Pennard. He was a calypso singer who used the name Sir Lancelot.
Oh, so he was like a singer. They would have known him as like a performer, like a musical guy.
Yeah, so he was in fact the butler around the house.
I'll be damned. Well, in that case, that's a cool name for a singer.
Yeah.
But in fact, a brief aside about him, though, I did appreciate that he was like a Jamaican immigrant, and we didn't lean into a lot of very easily stereotypes and tropes that they could have done. I mean, yeah, having a colored servant in general is pretty problematic, but you know, he's from Jamaica, and they didn't get all like, you know, he's a very normal person. He's a polite, normal, responsible person who likes to clean ships with a vacuum cleaner.
He's frankly more likable than the father.
Yeah, he didn't immediately fall into the trope of like being magical. He didn't like impart some voodoo mysticism or anything like that. He was just a guy with a job who's looking after the kid.
Right, yeah. Well, and even so, sorry, kid, I'd go with you, but these ships need cleaning, you know, so you just have to go on your own, little girl. You know, I thought that was pretty goofy. There's a lot of goofy moments in this movie. But one thing that's comforting to me, I don't know about you guys, but it's comforting to me that even back then, studios will just half-ass a sequel to make a quick buck. Like it's a comfort to me that this is a time-honored tradition in Hollywood.
This is this one's a real big, like maybe the worst offenders I've ever seen. Yeah, of like this.
I wanted to ask
clearly was not meant to be.
I wanted to ask you guys this. What are other violators that you think of? Because immediately what came to mind was Blair Witch 2 that had almost nothing to do with the original Blair Witch.
Texasville. The two Jakes.
Well, okay.
There's at least a couple. I think in particular the fourth entry in the famously no sequel to Die Hard except the fifth one was meant to be a Die Hard sequel. They were all retrofitted to be Die Hard sequels. I think it's most apparent with the fourth one, which is really different from the traditional formula. It's like a guy takes over the entire grid of the United States and like it's jumping on like jets kind of shit. That's like way more absurd. And it's a buddy thing with Justin Long. Like, truly, I think that movie would have been fine as a standalone action movie and is kind of bad as a Die Hard movie.
You could make the argument that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom has nothing to do with Raiders of the Lost Ark, but yet is a sequel, and that's still okay. Like that for some reason, but that's the format of Indiana Jones. They are kind of like these anthologies.
Yeah, I think the tone, but the tone stays consistent more or less.
Right. Yeah. And for what it's worth, the tone in Cat People and the tone in Curse of the Cat People are wildly different. First of all, Cat People was directed by a completely different director, and it shows. This guy, I can't remember his name, something French, and it looks French. It's very noiristic, very sharp edges. It's very kind of creepy. There are more elements of scariness in Cat People, I would argue, not as much as some people would say, but it is there.
I mean, there's murders. There's murders in Cat People.
Yes, and there's even more evidence of magic and scariness. There's actual moments. Part of the goofiness of this movie is that there's no real danger, like ever. Yeah. There's never ever. I never felt like I was worried about Amy.
I guess Amy almost. She goes out in the blizzard, and then that lady is gonna kill her.
And then right. I don't.
Yeah, they have like they tease it a little bit. There's like a little bit with the little match girl where it's like, oh, Amy's gonna die in the cold, and it's like, well, she's not. She's gonna end up at that lady's house because they would not have. That would be a very different film if they just had her go into the
and the only reason why we would imply that there's any sort of dread in going in that house is you had the daughter literally say the line, "I'm going to kill her." That's another goofy thing. It's kind of a product of its time where people just say exactly what's on their minds rather than implying it. But it had they spent more time on that B story, this would have been a more rewarding climax. But as it stands right now, it does feel very shoehorned and kind of hacky.
Again, I do not believe. I suppose there's room for debate on this. My read of this movie is that we are not supposed to believe anything supernatural actually happened in this film. I think, Irina doesn't become the form of the imaginary friend until she sees the picture. Like, it's all pretty clear, like, oh, okay, she's just working things into her imagination. I think the teacher even says as much. Like, it's so I guess if you thought there was a ghost element, I guess you could argue that. For me, it didn't seem like there was a ghost element. No, it just seemed like she had an imaginary friend.
This film reminded me a lot of like Pan's Labyrinth, I would imagine, borrowed a lot from this. But I think, like you guys are saying, the B story in that, namely the brown shirts that were taking over all of Spain, I think, in that.
Franco.
Franco, yeah. That is a really stark and pretty well-defined B story. And it also had like real-world danger. I mean, this film was only an hour long, so it's super short.
Oh yeah, but I felt and I still was all like, "Are we done yet?" Let's I still found myself like wandering around, like what I clearly got. We're never going to get to any curse or any cat people. Like once I got
at a certain
point, I've abandoned that hope. That's gone. And at that point, I'm just waiting for any sort of danger to befall on Amy. And it's not that I don't have any sympathy for her. You feel bad for her. She's a very sweet little girl who doesn't. She's very lonely, and there's a lot of emotional pull to that. But rather than lean in, I think that I'm going to give you a point for Pan's Labyrinth because I think that movie. I should say we each get 3 bonus points, so we're all there. So everyone's at 10. Everyone has 3 bonus points. But Borf, I'm giving you a bonus point for Pan's Labyrinth because I think that movie does well.
Get points for anything else.
I was going to say, Russell, cordially. It's too bad that we started doing this Halloween round because you had the intro down pat last time.
Yeah, I know.
And this time
and
it was
now
like
we thrown a kink in it, and it's just totally threw me off my game. But anyway, I did want to why I want to give you that point for Pan's Labyrinth because it kind of piggybacks my big problem with this movie, and that Pan's Labyrinth does very well, whereas this movie only tries to do. I think this movie is more in love with the theme of childhood fantasy and disillusionment and sort of fear, rather than telling a story about it, rather than trying to encapsulate that into an actual story. Whereas Pan's Labyrinth, the story is the story. It's this little girl kind of coping with the world around her, and there's not really any of that in this movie.
Yeah,
it's
and indeed, it's a specialty of like the Devil's Backbone is very much the same.
Sure.
Yeah. I heard one of the suggestions on this was that they were kind of describing this main character and at least Amy's like imaginary friend stuff as potentially being like somewhere on the autism spectrum because she makes a lot of strange choices, but they probably wouldn't have had a means of talking about it at the time.
Probably not.
But that was one of the things I saw come up that I thought was an interesting take on it because a lot of it is based off what happens in her head. And it seems like they're almost dealing with it like this is a new concept, like parents haven't considered their children have an internal emotional life before. Um, which might have been a theme in the 50s, like people coming back from the war just sort of focused on their kid. But it didn't feel like enough meat on the bone to keep this narrative going. It was like, well, she sometimes imagines things and she's hard to understand and she doesn't make friends very easily. How do these parents deal with this child? And, you know, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the storyline felt to me like something that would essentially play out over like a TV episode of like an after-school special of like, you know, I mean, it feels like an after-school special more than like a movie to me.
Right, and they should had they leaned into that, it probably would have been a little bit more followable. And you, like I said, I think had they just forget about the whole cat. You could have the same cast members, give them different names. They could be totally different things. It could be a totally different universe. And not saying it would have made the movie much better, but we wouldn't have had to waste time with this sort of expository information. You had to do that anyway with like the picture and the ghosts and all that. But I mean, then there's this really shoehorned way of introducing Irina and not even explaining what happened, but just sort of hinting at something really bad happened. And that's why I watch Cat People, because they made it in Curse of the Cat People sound like a better movie than the movie I was watching. And for what it's worth, it kind of is. It's not that much better. But one of the things that they do similarly, like one of the Cat People reminded me more of Gaslight, where I thought it was a much more interesting take on like a husband not really understanding that his wife is sort of losing it, where at Gaslight that's a little bit different, but it's still the same kind of, that's the ghostly aspect of it.
Well, the memory I have from the first one is that it had a big scene with someone in a pool and like shadows. And it's also known for the Luton bus, which is a jump scare.
He does it in this movie.
Yeah, it's a jump scare that has become common since. In short, it's that the lady thinks she's being chased by a cat person, and then there's a loud hiss, and the audience goes, "Oh my God, it's a cat!" And then it's just a bus that has stopped. It's the it's just a cat style jump scare reveal that it's nothing actually scary that has turned into a meme since.
In this film, it's done with the
it
sound.
It happens almost at the exact same spot in this movie.
Amy's out in the cold. She's crossing the Sleepy Hollow Bridge. She's remembering the story that Julia told her earlier, and she hears the sound of hooves approaching, and we, the audience, are like, is the Headless Horseman going to show up? Is this a horror movie after all? And no, it's just a truck with like some snow chains around it that makes a hoof sound for some reason.
Never heard tires with chains sound like hooves in my whole life, but you know, to each their own. And it's funny that that's kind of a, you know, he's kind of known for this because that's a cliche that can work. I mean, look, even in Cat People, I was like, oh okay, oh well, it worked. You did it. That's why, you know, it's just comforting to me that the system never changes. You know, that like they'll keep hammering out crap and we'll keep buying it.
A clarification on something. This is not super directly related to the movie, but it reminded something Chris said reminded me of this. Definitely at this time, I don't think it was super well known or popular, but the concept of autism did exist in some degree because a man named Hans Asperger was indeed researching it in Europe. He obviously is the guy Asperger's syndrome is named after. He's somewhat controversial because while he was doing his work, the Nazis invaded, I can't remember whatever country he was in. And he, he continued to do his work and didn't have any direct affiliation with the Nazis, but he directed 2 of his patients to a certain child hospital that turned out to be a euthanasia site. There's no evidence he knew that, but both of those kids did perish by pneumonia. So he's a controversial figure. Some people want to retire the word Asperger's because of that, but it's unclear how much involvement he might have just not known, for all we know.
Well, for what it's worth, the book that the teacher brings up to Oliver, to the dad, that's a real book. I mean, it's a real psychology book, and it's also interesting. You know, I wonder if a lot of the sort of horror movie aspect, even with Cat People, psychiatry and psychological stuff, how much that wasn't really all that talked about. I mean, psychiatry existed, but it was still kind of burgeoning.
I think that was a Val Lewton thing. I think some of
Really?
his films
It seems
like,
it
leaned
seems
into
very.
that.
From the two I saw back to back, yeah, I would say that he's got a type, and I appreciate that for what it is. That we don't just put Boris Karloff in a shit ton of makeup and go brah,
Sure.
to invoke fear or dread. But this movie never does. It never inspires any sort of sense of danger or any sense of like bone chillingness. It inspires more pity, and it inspires more like kind of, I don't know about frustration, but you're almost like you want to help the kid, and just like I'll be your friend, kid. I feel bad for poor Amy.
Yeah.
She's just this little girl with an overactive imagination who's, and doesn't have anyone to really share it with, so she just makes it up. And that's an interesting story, and that could even be an interesting horror story if you did it right. If you had any sense of that Amy herself was committing any dangerous acts.
There is a film that just came out. It's called Daniel Isn't Real. That's essentially what you're describing.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, I guarantee there's like, there's this movie that came out that's kind of in a similar vein to this. It's called either Mama or Mother. It features this mother whose face is wrapped in bandages, and she has two twin boys.
Oh, Good Night Mommy.
Good Night Mommy, yeah, and it has some aspects of what you're talking about in it. I can't say too much, but yeah.
But even with the whole idea of fantasy, you could have played a lot more with that with Mrs. Farron. The fact that she clearly doesn't know that her daughter is her daughter. You don't really get any resolution from that, and that's the main point of danger in the whole story. It's the climax of the film. And because you only get these little vignettes intercut with the movie of what that conflict's about, it doesn't really tie into anything.
It would have been more fun, I think, if there had been like a direct like death involved there, because the Capgras syndrome, where she just doesn't think her daughter is actually her daughter. It would have been more interesting if there had been like some sort of a coming to a head where she tries to kill her daughter, or anything really at all involving excitement and danger.
But I don't know. Okay, I mean, this is all true, but I can't blame the movie really for this, because the people actually creating this film, writing the script and directing it, weren't making a fucking horror movie. Like, the problem here is the studio decided to give this a horror movie title and a horror movie trailer and be like, add more horror shit for some reason. For all I know, the Sleepy Hollow shit was completely thrown in like by the studio.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I just think that if your expectation of this movie was different going in, like you didn't expect curses and fucking cat people,
so here's
you'd probably have a more favorable response to this movie.
With the lighting in this was something that jumped out at me, because they do a lot of like interesting things with the lighting, like extreme light during the day to create shadows and things like that. It's because, spoiler warning, everything in this movie that's in the backyard is shot on a sound stage. So, do you think
like
that
most of this movie was on a sound?
I mean, it was super cheap, but do you think that the lighting and some of the presentation might have had more of a horror influence than it was necessary to? Like, would it have been better if it had been more lyricism rather than making everything look as spooky and moody?
They leaned into like the fantasy element, I think, more of it, like where Arena makes like the trees kind of sparkle and the wind kind of gusts up, and it's almost like it's almost magical, and I think that had they leaned more into that and not chosen to light it, as you say, in this sort of stark, ghostly terms, it would have been a fucking Disney movie. Like this could have been a Disney movie under different circumstances. Zach, I kind of agree with you about that. Part of the lack of stakes in this movie could have been Archaeo's meddling. I'm willing to believe that, but then I saw Cat People, and it's not that Cat People had that much scare or danger other than the fact that she turns into a panther. That's at least
I'm not necessarily saying like, okay, this movie like you still have to think it's great, but like I think the criticism of like there weren't enough horror elements or things like that is truly because of the false expectations set by the meddling. Like, for instance, I don't think A Beautiful Mind is a great movie, but if it had been like called like A Killer Intellect and the trailer was like he's lost control of reality and who knows what actions he'll take next. Like, you'd go in and watch the fucking movie and be like, well, this is not what this movie's about. And you're
very well done.
Like, the way it's marketed would fuck up the movie. And I think the way it's marketed is not a fair critique of the movie per se in this case.
Sure.
Even if you don't like the movie besides that.
Zach's got a point from me. That's
alrighty. That's too good. Yeah. And I that I'll concede as well. But even if I just remove the expectation, because like I said, I abandoned hope of being scared little before halfway through this movie. But it's not even the stakes of danger or dread, but it's even the stakes of anybody accomplishing anything. Sure. Amy's just sort of wandering around and traipsing about and dancing with her friend. There's no real action that happens. No real. It's more like a novel, you know. It doesn't really have any.
I agree. It's
any actual actionable stakes that anybody will come. Even if I remove the scariness of it, I'm just talking general.
It's a bit. It's a bit slow. The scenes, especially in the first half, in my opinion, meander a little too much. It took a while for me to figure out like what the point of the movie was, and that's saying something to feel like this movie has padding because it's 70 minutes long. Yeah, it's short as hell.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. That's what there are TV shows that are longer than this movie, and it was shot on a budget, you know, because RKO wanted to shoot it on a budget. I mean, it's not that RKO was broke, you know. This was after Citizen fucking Kane.
Yeah, they shot this in fact on the magnificent Amberson sets.
Oh well, they're gonna milk everything they can out of that movie. So yeah, and that's why I just think that a lot of it is studio meddling, but I also feel like there was an unfocused nature of what the main character is actually grasping for, and a lot of it's the sign of the times where everyone just sits around in a fucking drawing room and just discuss like what is to be done with little Amy.
It doesn't have the opening 15 minutes set up the main thrust of the storyline thing going on. It just kind of meanders,
and you could have done that with Mrs. Farron and Barbara Farron. Like, I think if you're gonna make that the main danger of the whole show, it would have served you better to have that planned out. But like I said, this movie was tossed between many hands and a lot of fights happened, I'm sure. But RKO's the boss, and they're the ones who pay the bills, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like even if I didn't have scary stuff in it, I felt like you could have had some stuff in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It kind of goes over like a lead balloon a little bit. Like, if it hadn't had that title, I think it would have been better. And if they'd just done a little bit more with the B story. Like, there were other, just casually looking up Capgrass.
Spend more time there.
Like, evidently the Capgrass syndrome was originally thought of as a female syndrome because I guess it's like 3 to 2 is the prevalence of it. But they thought, the concept behind it was they thought it was attached to hysteria, which is the old classic lady disease, which is fake. But they did find out that you can temporarily give people Capgras syndrome by administering ketamine. So yeah, I mean, they could have had a lot more fun with that B story if they just had the old ketamine. Lady. Yeah, a little more ketamine, a little less.
If your movie's a little dull, add a little Special K.
There you go, man. There you go. Party on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they also could have so I think you could spend more time. Amy is kind of the focus and like her imagination. I think you could spend more time even seeing her relationship with like other kids, perhaps even being more mean to her to like give her more sympathy or pathos, or spend more time with the father and seeing his taking a deeper look at having his wife have a bigger role and looking at his like deep antipathy for the idea of imagination and examining that a little deeper, because the father's a dick
He seems really dense to like paying attention. He doesn't read the room very well. Doesn't pay attention to his daughter very well. Doesn't listen to his wife. Yeah, he's a dick.
Yeah.
And it also, I think this movie would have served better, because there's that opening scene where the kids are learning or whatever, and she's off daydreaming. I think it would have been useful to see what she was daydreaming about, to let us know right away we're being pulled into the brain,
the imagination
of a young child, and I think that would have served better too. Again, had this movie not been so cheap and so rushed, I think that this movie could have been really good. Yeah,
there's a few good bones in this movie. That's scarier than the movie.
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah. But yeah, I guess it's as good as time as any to get to final thoughts, because the movie still is pretty well received. It was well received at the time, and it still has a pretty decent following. I mean, it's got an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I do not get the hype of this movie. I thought it was a fair attempt. As Zach says, like this movie is more of a skeleton of a movie with that's missing some very crucial bones. But that being said, the bones that are in there, as far as being a fantasy film about childhood ennui, is interesting. And had we lost the whole context of cat people, and spent more time and money on justifying the B story, I think this movie could have been a lot better. But for 70 minutes, it really did feel like a kind of a slog.
Yep. I'll go next. So I think that I kind of get the hype of this movie because aspects of the hype. Because like Russell, I think there's things here that are later done better. I think a movie, and this is like something that I could see people who made those movies watching and being like, there's really good, like this is a fresh idea. It could inspire them in some ways. The idea of this little girl with like a deep imagination and examining the psychology behind like her imaginary friend and all this stuff, and not even in a way that's necessarily horror, but in a way that's examining like this childhood loneliness to some degree. Like I think that's really interesting, and I also think the ambiguity of the supernatural elements, where like you watch this movie and you could argue it's a ghost story, but it's like very much like, but it makes complete sense for this to be exclusively about a little girl and her imaginary friend, and nothing supernatural happens at any point. It's just the power of a child's imagination. And I think if they had developed maybe the conflict between her and her father better, the B story a little better, and spent a little less time with like really meandering scenes of like her playing, and like less time in that first act getting things set into motion, it could have been a lot more rewarding. I think it's imperfect, but there's little gems here and there sort of in the DNA of the thing.
And we kind of brushed by it, but I mean, it is something to be said. It's Robert Weiss's first movie, and who went on to have an illustrious career.
Qualified.
He and not even in the horror genre. I mean, it's not going to qualify for this particular theme, but The Haunting is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
We could have done that last year, and it's another movie where the supernatural elements are debatable in reality.
Yeah, and that movie rules. But this movie, again, it seemed like he was more doing this for a favor. Like, fine, I'll do it, and it kind of shows. But anyway, I didn't want to end the episode and not at least talk about Robert Weiss, and again, what an illustrious career he had to post Curse of the Cat.
Though I will also give The Haunting credit because, like, it has the benefit of having some truly spectacular source material.
Sure.
Yeah. My thoughts on this are much the same. I was a big fan of Robert Wise, still am. So I think back in the day it was probably more of a academic interest to watch this. It didn't really stick with me very much, but it's not terrible. It's just an odd fit for what they called it, an odd fit for how it was presented, and I kind of
an odd fit for our theme.
Yeah. As far as that goes, I sort of feel like I put my hopes and dreams into a tree, and I'm now sitting alone on my birthday. So I don't know. Hopefully you guys pick out something better. I think
I didn't hate this movie. It's just a weird choice for the Halloween segment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a horror film at all.
Right. I didn't hate it, but I definitely didn't like it. I definitely did not. It wasn't that good, but yeah. For being a horror movie, and again, we're looking in that era, there's a lot of like tightrope walking you're gonna have to do in some cases. Like some are just comedies, and honestly, some are just dog shit. One of the most prolific classic horror movie like director producers, Burt I. Gordon, pioneering on special effects for like The Amazing Colossal Man. But watch those movies with a modern eye, and you'll be like, this is stupid.
I'll be honest, Russell. If you did pick something like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, I would be impressed, and I'd be like, all right.
Man, I was close. I was so close, and I'll tell you. I guess I'll pull the curtain back there, dear listener. Before we do, let's take a quick rundown of the points. So, Chris Boreth, you have 11 points because I gave you a point for Pan's Labyrinth, with 2 bonus points to give out. I have 2 bonus points to give out with 10 points for Vital Voting. Zach, you have 3 bonus points to give out with 1 point from Chris for the Killer Intellect tagline for A Beautiful Mind. So I guess the chore befalls to me to figure out what next, hopefully, horror movie we get to choose in this era. Because I went back and forth on this, and honestly, after seeing Curse of the Cat People, I had to disqualify one because I was debating whether or not it was an actual horror movie, and I already mentioned it. It was Gaslight. I don't know if you could really constitute that as a horror movie. It's more of a thriller. So I kind of took that out. And one thing that I did see was a Universal movie with Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, but it's like a musical comedy. And it's essentially a ripoff of another Boris Karloff movie that I am going to choose from 1932, The Old Dark House. The Old Dark House. They remade it in 1955. Do not watch that one. Watch the 1932 one. That one has Boris Karloff. It's got Charles Laughton and Melvin Douglas.
That's funny.
It's directed by the same director as Invisible Man and Frankenstein, and it's a Universal it's a Universal horror movie from the 1930s.
Quick tag in on this one because it's a Colorado connection. When this one was being remastered, there was a film transfer house in Denver. I don't know if it still exists, but they were transferring the original Nitrate film, so I actually got to see some of the original film from this film that you picked out being transferred in person. And they said,
well, they just released like a 4K version too.
That's probably better than what they had.
Wow. Yeah, so I thought that would be interesting. It's based off a novel or short story by J.B. Presley. So at least that like the source material isn't just working out the childhood trauma of a particular cheap movie producer like Luton.
And interestingly, I think Curse of the Cat People, which was filmed during World War II, was the oldest movie we had covered ever on this show, and Old Dark House immediately superseding it. I guess I have the option of going even further back, which would probably indicate
Dr. Caligari.
Yeah, I could like go Nosferatu or
I think
Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
The original Frankenstein.
Oh, sure, it's Frankenstein and Dracula are both 31, I think. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean the original Frankenstein, the one that's like I think Thomas Edison
OG.
shot a silent Frankenstein way back when.
Yep. I got to tell you, a lot of what made my choice to pick this movie was that it's available. Because one movie I really want, but I can't seem to find it. I didn't want to have to put Borth to go through any more work than he already does for this show. Because I was trying to find the Queen of Spades, directed by Thorold Dickinson. I can't find it anywhere, but it's based off an old Pushkin story. It's been remade several times, but I thought that was an interesting idea. But no, The Old Dark House seems to be scary and spooky enough and got a really decent pedigree as far as directors and actors. So, The Old Dark House it is.
Well, the 1910 Frankenstein is 12 minutes long, so I probably won't pick that.
Good night, everybody. Okay, I guess that wraps us up, gents. This has been a fun, meowing good time.
Yeah.
It's a real pursuit that we went about here.
There we go. Okay. And on that note, thank you everybody for joining us. Tune in next time for round 2 of our spooky themes with the Old Dark House. I have been Russell Carlson.
We should, in honor of Curse of the Cat people, this week we should just call the show The Literary Morse Code.
Okay. I was joined by Chris Borough.
Take it easy. Don't get catch scratch fever.
And also with me, this has been Zach Powers.
You aren't my co-hosts. My co-hosts died.
And as we always say on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to be Chevy Chase's mom. See ya.
That is the literary Morse code promise.
I don't know what literary Morse code means.
I don't know, but neither of those are in this show.
Well, it's been fun. See ya, everybody.